everyone, it's Jai452 here in a new segment talking art and various other things. My special guest today is the one, the only, John Stork.
Mm.
Hi, how are you today, John?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. So I'm just going to jump right in and ask you a couple of different questions. First off, being you were past in the past you were a circus performer, so tell us a little bit about that and how you got involved with that.
Um, when I was young, my big hero was Jackie Chan, and I was doing a lot of martial arts training, but I wanted to learn acrobatics and juggling and physical comedy. And I was really lucky where I grew up in the middle of nowhere, Vermont. There happened to be a circus for kids pretty close by. It's called Circus Smirkus, and they have a big circus tent. They tour all over New England every summer, and they have great coaches from all over the world. And that was pretty much in my backyard. So I started training with two Russian circus coaches who had a class all throughout the year, and then they encouraged me to audition for Circus Smirkus, and I got in. And what was the question again?
How you got involved with
Yeah,
the
okay.
circus background.
Yeah, it's,
So how long did you actually spend in the circus?
that's kind of a tough question. I mean, I was in and out. I started training in circus arts, if you want to call them that, I think when I was 12. Um, I toured with Circus Smirkus when I was 15, 16, and 17, but that was just in the summers. I mean, I was training in circus all year long, but only performing in the summers. Then when I was 17, after working with Circus Smirkus, I went and worked for this little circus out in Chicago called the
Mm.
Midnight Circus. And I worked with them on and off for like 7 or 8 years. I lived in Chicago for 3 or 4. I worked with some other small circus at the time. The last like actual circus I worked for, I think, was in 2000, and I guess it was 2010.
Hmm.
But I've done circus style shows since then, and my street show when I'm street performing, which is how I make a living now, is very circus themed. Um, so yeah, it was kind of feast or famine where, sometimes you're working every day and then sometimes you have months at a time where there's no gigs, which is part of why I wanted to learn how to street perform so I could make money whenever I didn't have circus or performing gigs.
So let's go a little bit deeper into that history of circus. How was the training for that for people who might be interested in that kind of thing? Was it
How
very
was the
rigorous?
training?
How was
Um,
the training for that? Like, was it rigorous? Was it something that
it was
you
for
could do
me,
very
but
easily?
my coaches were very old school and they were very intense former Soviet acrobats, which I liked. I mean, it was similar to martial arts training for me,
Hmm.
where it was very, regimented and almost militaristic in a way. So I was used to that type of environment. But I think now circus is kind of coming more into vogue, especially circus style training. There's
Hmm.
a lot of gyms now that are incorporating that type of curriculum, and I think there's all different sorts of teaching styles, and there's some that start a lot more casually and gracefully. You're not just getting yelled at by some crazy Russian guy. So I think for people who are interested in circus training, I think there's probably programs that they would find agreeable,
Um,
hopefully nearby.
would you ever advise anyone to do that kind of thing?
It all depends on what people are looking for. I think it's a fun way to stay in shape. Everyone tries to exercise these days, or I feel like most people, fitness is a big craze right now. And why not learn to juggle or balance on something weird while you're getting in shape? Or,
Um,
there's always the potential of maybe you're going to perform someday when you're doing circus arts, which I think is cool. I really love performing. And some
um,
people are terrified of it, I guess, but if you have any sort of inkling towards doing that,
what was the one
maybe it's.
thing that when you were in the circus you always wanted to try but maybe didn't get the chance to do so?
Um, that's a pretty good question. To be honest, I feel like I got to try pretty much everything that I wanted to try, but maybe more so, there were things that I wish I was good at, but I just wasn't. Like I love to watch the real high flying acrobatics like teeterboard or voltige or Korean plank or even trampoline can be pretty cool, but I just have the worst air sense if I'm not holding on to something or, touching something solid, I really have bad, I get disoriented. So I can balance pretty well, but I can't flip high in the air, but I love to watch that type of act.
You can flip high in here. I don't believe that for a second. Um, so this question might actually pop up when we go through various segments of the show. But in terms of the circus and circus performing,
Mhm.
who did you look up to? Because you did mention that you looked up to Jackie Chan. Is there anybody in particular in the circus area that you looked up to that is either still performing or has moved into the role of teacher and is now teaching the next generation?
There's individuals who aren't famous, but were very inspirational to me. And if I said their names, no one would know who they are. But for the
Yeah,
most part, the
go ahead.
people who inspired me the most were clowns, actually.
Hmm.
Um, I always saw these particular clowns, they were always writing their own material and they were very creative and they would often make their own costumes. I mean, they just, I felt like the other circus performers, while they were pretty cool, the clowns tended to kind of encapsulate everything. They weren't just good at this or that, they were good at a lot of different things. And most of all, they were creative in putting the different skills together. And sometimes you watch a circus show and maybe the clowns seem like they don't know what they're doing, but that's part of the act. They often have more skills than anyone, I'd say, at least the clowns that I looked up to. Um, as far as famous people go, I was really inspired by the chair stacking act in I think it's Nouvelle Experience, which is a Cirque du Soleil show.
Hmm.
And then that guy went on to perform in Lanuba as well. I'm sure, I'm thinking it was the same guy. I don't know his name, but I'm pretty sure he was Russian. But his chair stacking act really blew my mind because I loved handstands right away. And I just thought it was cool to be using the chairs that way because chairs are something that everyone has, but everyone knows they can't do that with their chairs. So I don't know. That act really inspired me.
Um, so when did you roughly kind of start creating your own kind of characters in regards to the circus? Or was that something that you got the chance to do?
My last year with Circus Smirkus, every year we had a different theme. My first year it was space, my second year it was cowboys, and my third and final year it was superheroes and comic books. So
Hmm.
I was like, oh, awesome, that's great. And that year we had to re-audition every year. That year we had to audition as a made-up character that was a superhero. So I guess that's when I invented Super Impact Man, who became Hyperstrike. Um, but yeah, I guess I was kind of shoved into it, but I was really excited to be shoved into it because yeah, that
I
was right up my
think,
alley.
if I'm not mistaken, there is probably a couple of videos of you on YouTube doing
Mhm.
various circus performances just before you did Hyperstrike, because I've checked the dates on them and they are
Uh,
dated before the second season of the show. Um, how do you feel when you watch back videos like that? Do you sometimes do what everybody else does and you just kind of like, oh my God, look at my hair, you know? Um,
it's really a mixed bag for me at this point. I look back on it fondly in some ways, but I also have regrets that I didn't do things differently or that I didn't maybe stick with it the way I should have or the way I wanted to anyway. I mean, I used to have really big plans and dreams for my circus career, and that they never really came about. So, I mean, it was fun a lot of the things I did, and I'm proud of some of the things I created. But I'm also a little bit sad that maybe it didn't quite go the way I hoped it would when I was younger.
is there any, if you had
So
the
it's nostalgic, I guess, at this
I know,
point.
I know, I know. If you had the opportunity to go back and do anything differently, is there anything you would do differently?
Yeah, that's a really long list. I don't know if we can get into
Well,
that now.
what would be the top three things that you would do differently, and then the top three things you wouldn't do differently? So let's talk about the top three that you would do differently.
I know one thing I used to think about a lot years ago was I wish I'd started getting into comedy and writing my own, comedy skill acts sooner than I did. I mean, I think I still did it pretty soon, but I feel like maybe I kind of dropped the ball my last year at Circus Smirkus. I should have been more focused on performing and maybe even trying to say, like I say, write my own act. Um, but I just maybe I was too scared, or I just wasn't my head wasn't in the right place yet. Um, but yeah, I wish I had started a little sooner with that. Um, Another regret I have about when I was younger is I wouldn't listen to anybody for a while. I was like, oh, I know best, and this is my artistic process, and I don't have to listen to anybody. And I think I burnt a lot more bridges than I should have. I should have collaborated more. Um, those are the two that come to mind.
Awesome.
But that's all
So
water under the bridge
is there
years ago.
is there anything that you wouldn't do differently looking back on your circus career?
Um, I guess maybe it's kind of sad that there's more things I'd probably want to change now that I have the experience or more experience. Um, I guess I'm happy I worked with the coaches that I did work with.
Hmm.
Zina and Volodya, my Russian circus coaches. Maybe I shouldn't have worked with them for quite as long as I did. Maybe it would have been good to switch to different coaches eventually. Maybe I stayed with them for longer than I should have. Um, yeah, I'm not sure. It's easy. I don't know. It's a complicated question, and time traveling is dicey, as we all know.
Well, we don't want to end up affecting anything that changes the currents,
Yeah, the
you know.
butterfly effect.
Um, I think we'll leave that kind of stuff to Barry Allen, The Flash, to screw up the timeline. Um, okay, so my next question for you will kind of change gears a little bit. So you've been in the circus for a good few years, and they are now starting to kind of push you to do this TV show called Who Wants to Be a Superhero? Now,
Mhm.
had you watched the previous season of Who Wants to Be a Superhero, or was it just something that somebody told you about on a whim and you just went, all right, I'll do that?
I actually applied for the first season. Someone had told me about it, and they're like,
Uh,
you already have all the work done. You already perform as a superhero. You have the costume. You have the character.
mhm.
Just apply. So I did, and I think the producers called me once or twice, and I was like, oh, awesome. I'm definitely going to get this. But then I didn't, so I was kind of angry. But I watched the first season. I thought it was pretty entertaining. Um, and I didn't apply for the second season. They just had my application on file still. They called me up out of the blue in the dead of winter. I was living in Chicago at the time, and yeah, it really surprised me. And
Awesome.
that time it went through. But that time they also had me fly out to LA to audition in person,
Hmm.
which was pretty
So,
exciting, I guess.
so my question has to be like, having watched both the second and first season, what were your initial thoughts on the first season? Like, did you see the people who were going through as like your initial picks? Because that was something that me and my cousins had issues with. Like, we were saying, oh, this person's going to go through, and then oh, this person's going to go through, and we would argue for hours on end who was going through. Um, did you have a similar kind of thing? Did you watch and go, right, they're going through, they're going through?
When I watched it, I don't think I looked at it so much from the perspective of being a competitor on the
Hmm.
show, so much as the producers, what's entertaining, what's not, who should we keep around, why should we keep them around, like. And honestly, I think one of the big parts of entertainment on a reality TV show is kicking people off. That's some of the best parts, entertainment wise. So I guess I was trying to look at it more from that perspective because I am interested in writing and directing. So I wasn't necessarily immersing myself as a competitor on the show.
Hmm.
I was trying to look at the whole picture.
So let's talk about your appearance on the second season,
Okay.
which, guys, if you have the opportunity to, I do believe it's available on YouTube Red. You can find it at whatever price it's at, the entire season of one and two. And you'll get to see John in his wonderful performance as Hyperstrike. Um, so when you came down to LA, because you mentioned you were flown out to LA for it.
Mhm.
What was running through your head when they flew you out? Were you like nervous? Were you just kind of calm, cool, and collected?
I was excited. I mean, I was living in Chicago. It was the dead of winter. It was so cold. I had no money. I was trying to figure out what I was going to do. I was teaching circus a little bit, I think, at some after school program. So going from that to being flown out to LA to audition for the show, with Stan Lee and superheroes, I was thrilled. It was very glamorous compared to what I'd been doing.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, I was mostly excited. I mean, I'm sure I was nervous as well. I think I remember working on my routine in the hotel room the night before, trying to figure out what lines and poses I was going to use, trying to anticipate the questions they would ask me.
Um, so I want to ask you a little bit about the costume because I have just recently done a big, massive um, YouTube series on cosplays and such like. So how did you come up with the costume for Impact Man, and then did you have any collaboration on the costume for Hyperstrike as well? So let's talk about Impact Man first. So how
Hmm.
did you come up with the costume and for that, and what was the um, creation process as well?
Yeah, I really wanted to do something that was martial artsy, but also, had an anime video game style feel to it. And of course, I was hugely inspired by Akira Toriyama and Dragon Ball. But it took me a while to actually pin down what I wanted the Super Impact Man costume to look like. And I remember I was in a video game store in some suburb of Chicago, and I saw a big statue of Mario, but it wasn't regular Mario. It was when he has the fire power,
Hmm.
the flame flower, and I liked, the he had the white overalls with the red highlights, basically, and I just the what the Super Impact costume ended up being that just popped right into my head, and I saw the exclamation marks on the pants. Yeah, just it flew right into my head.
So I've got to ask,
I remember that moment.
where did the initial black with red belt come from? Because there is one of you like that.
Hmm.
Um, and it looks very martial artsy to me, and I'm guessing that's where the inspiration came for that one. So how did that one come about?
I think a big inspiration for that. Well, first of all, once I found out that I got on the show, I wanted to keep performing as Super Impact Man in the circus. So whatever character you use on the show, um, Stan Lee, his company, whatever, they get the rights to that character, so you can't continue using it without their permission. So I talked to the producers and I was like, hey, I want to keep performing as Super Impact Man in the circus. Can I just change the name and the costume a little bit for your show? And they were fine with that. And they were happy once we came up with the name Hyperstrike. They thought that was cool. Uh, but yeah, one of my main inspirations for that first costume was there was some new Shinobi game. I think it was on PlayStation 2, and I'd seen my brother
Yeah,
playing it. And I think he was mostly in black, but he had this really cool scarf.
yeah, the big long one that just trailed.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it
I
looked
remember that
cool.
game.
Yeah, so that was kind of the inspiration for the scarf and the more black costume for Hyperstrike.
That's really cool. I had no idea where that one had came from. I had my like when I seen you in that costume because like when I started watching Who Wants to Be a Superhero like way back in the first season, I instantly became drawn to the show. I was like, I want to know everything there is to know about these people. And then when I found out they were doing a season two, I immediately jumped online and was like, okay, who have we got in season two? And I started looking at various pictures of all of you guys and going, oh, right, this costume's really, really cool. And like, I could
Right.
see how somebody could do that at a Comic Con event over in America as well.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, like when I seen that one, I was like, there's something about that particular costume that looks familiar to me, but I don't know what it is.
There it is.
So I now know.
Secret revealed.
Um, okay, so the Hyperstrike costume, when you guys all on the show eventually got your costumes and Stan gave you your new names if your new names were needed, how much collaboration did you have on that costume, or was that something that Stan had personally designed and said, you're going to be wearing this?
Um, I mean, I don't want to poke holes in anything, but I'm not sure how much Stanley really has to do with designing the actual costumes. I mean, I think that's the story as it goes on the show,
Hmm.
but I'm not sure if in reality he has much to do with the design. And I certainly didn't have anything to do with that design.
Ah,
I really hated it at first, but by the end of the show, I thought it was cool. I was fine with it.
um, it looked great. You know,
Oh,
everybody's
thanks.
costumes looks great. Was there any particular costume you looked at on the show and just went, what they've given you is so different to what you initially came up with? Because like your initial one was better than what they gave you. Because
um, I think they did a
um,
great job. I mean, at first it's jarring because you've been hanging out with these people for quite a few days at that point. You've been doing crazy things together, so their image is fairly well locked into your mind.
mm,
But yeah, I think everyone's costumes looked pretty great actually. I mean, I was especially critical of my own when I first saw it, but especially in hindsight, I think the costumers did a great job. Or you know what? What about Mindset? That was like
yeah,
the one where they dropped the ball, I guess, because his first costume was awesome.
when, like I said, I watched the show with my two cousins, and we actually, when we got to the second season, we looked at Mindset's costume. Like my oldest cousin pointed out and said, "Yeah, I think they've dropped the ball there." But
Hmm.
being an artist myself, like I looked at, I want to make sure I get the name right. Is it Bakasura?
Oh, Basura, yeah.
Basura. Like I looked at her costume and I literally could see, like from what we knew about the character at that point, I could see how that costume pulled together. And then
Hmm.
when they revamped her costume, I was like, yeah, I think you kind of dropped the ball there just a tiny bit. But then that was my own critical choice. You know, I was like,
Right.
I kind of like what she did there, you know. Um, but yeah, I kind of also see for you guys now that I'm a little bit older, I see where people say, yeah, they really dropped the ball on their mindset. So, um,
Yeah, that just that whole shoulder piece he had,
yeah.
I don't know, it was so cool.
Um, did you get a chance to talk to them about their costumes and whatnot?
Yeah, I mean, it was a real interesting process filming the show. We had so much time to ourselves, but we were always being filmed, so it wasn't really to ourselves, but we kind of knew, I mean, most of what we were doing on film wasn't going to make it onto the show.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, I mean, we talked for hours about our costumes after we got them.
Awesome. So let's move on to a little bit about the show itself. Now, the show consisted of you guys living together,
Hmm.
as well as doing various challenges that was set by, well, according to the show, they're set by Stan Lee.
Right, right.
I dare say the producers are the ones that handed down what you were doing each day. Um, what were your feelings on the challenges? Because some of them are really quite intimidating. Like, for instance,
Hmm.
the one with yourself, diffuser, and hygiena when you go up
Hmm.
against the attack dogs.
Yeah.
Like, I am not kidding you. My heart was in my mouth for all three of you. I was like, oh my God. Um, although in the back of my head, I knew that like the producers wouldn't put you guys in any immediate danger, you know.
Sure, sure.
Um, but I was just looking at it and I was going, oh God, oh God, oh God. Was there any particular point where you guys were like scared witless on a challenge?
That one was scary. I mean, I was scared of dogs and wolves as a little kid. And I mean, I'm not as scared of them as an adult, but I still have a little bit of that deep-seated fear
Uh-huh.
from as a child. I mean, it was similar to the one they had on season one. There was a challenge with dogs, I think, as
Yeah,
well.
they did.
And I remember watching season one and being like, oh, if I was on the show, I wonder if I could handle that. Like, that's kind of scary. Those dogs are tough. I knew the armor would be really heavy. Um, So I was kind of wondering if they would bring that one back or not. So when they did, I was kind of curious still to see if I could handle it. And it was really grueling. It was really hot. The armor was heavy. The dogs were really strong, but it was kind of fun at the same time to see if I could get through it.
I remember, and I was so glad that they didn't cut this out. and I think it was specifically because of how strong Hygiena was.
Hmm.
Um, she initially did say to you guys, because it was the three of you left on that show, the show at that point, and she said,
Hmm.
"Look, I know I'm going to go down, so you guys just go on ahead."
Hmm.
But she did not give up. She
Yeah.
was like, I'm doing this. I don't care if you dogs like bite the living hell out of me. I'm going to be there,
Right.
Um, and the end scene for that, like when the three of you guys just hugged it out, I was like, oh my God. I literally was shaking, as was my two cousins. We were like, oh my God, that is so touching. But at the same time, it's like, I had to give props to her at that. I was like, oh my God, you're a braver woman than I've ever known you. Um, what was the kind of backstage, well, behind the scenes feel of that? Was there a, like, oh my God moments when she initially went down, or?
I think we were pretty well adjusted to it in some ways by that point. I mean, that was one of the last challenges. We'd been there for 2 or 3 weeks by then, just constantly doing crazy things. So I don't know. I think obviously we had fears and doubts about it, but we at that point we were used to kind of overcoming that kind of thing and relying on each other for support through these trials. So it was kind of in some ways another day at the office at that point. But I think we also constantly had that feeling of like, holy crap, this is amazing. This is so cool that we're getting to do this. Yeah, maybe it's hard and miserable, but it's also awesome.
Awesome.
So it was fun. It was fun.
Um, what were some of the more what were some of the challenges that was set to you guys on the show that you in particular just couldn't wait to do?
The stunt day was really cool, getting to do the wires and do some of the fight choreography and falls. I mean, that's the kind of thing I'm into, especially from watching Jackie Chan as a kid. I was actually really excited to do the dog challenge because I'd seen it in the season before and it looked really hard and I didn't know how I would do. I was curious to see how it would go. Um, yeah, those are probably the two that really. I like roller coasters too, so that was fun.
Awesome.
Uh,
Was there any challenges that you were quite intimidated on in particular? Like, was there any ones that you just weren't sure how you were going to be received?
yeah, I think the one that threw me for the biggest loop was the first one. I mean, it was day one. They literally blindfolded us while they drove us to this location, and we're in the middle of this big, almost tunnel sort of thing. And I didn't expect it to be that hard, honestly, especially the first challenge like that. That one was very tough. I mean, maybe it was just because it was out of context. We weren't used to being challenged in such a vigorous way yet. But yeah, that one really kind of knocked my socks off. But I guess it was a good way to start because from then on, we were ready for anything.
Awesome.
Maybe it didn't look that impressive on camera, but that was a really challenging, uncomfortable
It,
scenario.
to be honest, when I first seen that one, I was like, I was not expecting them to be thrown in at the deep end
Right.
that soon, you know?
Right after that.
Um, because like that was the hose challenge where you guys had to get to one end and um you were all getting sprayed with water.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean, we didn't even know each other yet. We didn't know anything. That was like the first morning of shooting.
the first thing that somebody said, like when we were watching that, they said to us, because I can't remember if you guys were all together or split into teams for that one, but
Hmm.
somebody when we were watching that said, you know what they should do? They should all get behind Mindset and have him walk up because of the armor
Sure.
he was
Yeah,
wearing. And I'm like,
good
that's
idea.
actually not a bad idea. So yeah, is looking back at the challenges, is there any particular challenge that you would have done differently looking back on them?
Probably not. I mean, I haven't watched the show in a long time, and I don't remember all the challenges offhand. I remember my biggest maybe mistake was telling the kid my name in the school, but I didn't feel bad about that. I could tell the kid was embarrassed about his name, and I was like, it's more important for this kid to hopefully start getting over that than for me to win this show. So,
I
no, I
remember watching that particular challenge with my cousins again, and my oldest cousin was a big fan of the diffuser. You know,
Uh-huh.
he was avid that he was going to win the show and whatnot, and I was kind of like halfway going through the show, going, yeah, we'll see, we'll see. Um, and when we got to that particular episode, I think that was one of the last challenges that you guys did that aired on the show.
Mhm.
Um, when you did that, I remember my cousin going, "Oh, John, what you doing?" He just kind of like put his head in his hands, and I'm like, just. ah." Um, but initially, like now that we're older, we look back on that and go, "Yeah, we understand why he did what he did." And I personally felt like you shouldn't have been penalized for that, but obviously when you're pretending to, well, when you're playing as a superhero, you can't say your real name. Um, but
I knew it would be good for the show, even if it got me kicked off. Like I say, part of the entertainment on a reality TV show is watching people mess up. So
mm,
I thought it'd
was
be good for
there,
the kid, good for the show. Maybe not good for me winning the show, but
for on the show when people were getting booted off, was there any person that you felt shouldn't have been kicked off as early as they probably were kicked off?
um,
Because obviously when they announce who's leaving on the elimination, we see everybody's reaction, and a lot of the times that felt like a genuine reaction to me. So was there anybody that, like I say, that got kind of sent home that you felt, oh my God, no, they shouldn't be going home?
I mean, I think the first elimination was surprising,
Hmm.
and then I think maybe just because everyone was probably focused on themselves at that point, trying to get through it. Like it was such a overwhelming first challenge, we hadn't necessarily maybe been able to look and see what the others were doing or messing up. So that was surprising, I guess. That was probably the most surprising one. From there, maybe it was more easy to see, well, maybe they could have done better. Maybe they did mess that up. Maybe I messed that up. I deserve to be on the chopping block.
Okay. Um, okay, so my next one, um, in regards to the show, was the toys that you guys got.
Mm-hmm.
Is again when it's the final three, the talking toys. Um, you were so animated when you got that toy, and understandably, like anybody who gets a toy of themselves must be like on cloud nine. Um,
Right.
do you still have that toy?
My parents have it. I gave it to them. So
Awesome.
whenever I go home, I see it.
And what's that like actually seeing yourself as a toy?
Yeah, I mean, as a kid, that's what you're always after, right? Is the latest action figure. I mean, for me, it was Ninja Turtles. So when you become that thing you used to seek so fervently, I guess, yeah, it's pretty surreal. Um,
Awesome.
yeah, I
Um,
guess is the word I would use.
I don't know whether you like watched that particular episode, but the kind of like zooming out shot of you guys going to bed, you're all just pressing
Yeah,
the talk button. How long did that go for? Because obviously in the show you get like so much of a time for that. Were you guys literally just pressing the talk
we had
button
a
on the
pretty good
toy?
rapport at that point, uh, so we were just messing with each other as well. We we had a good sense of humor, I think, and it's important to have that when you're going through something like we were.
Hmm.
I mean, we were pretty exhausted by that point, and we knew there were still plenty of challenges to come. So I think it was good that we were able to laugh together.
Awesome. So what was it actually like getting to work with a comic book legend like Stan Lee? Did you guys have much interaction with him, or was it predominantly like what we seen on the show where he just
It was
pops up on a...
predominantly what you saw on the show, but there were a few times, I remember a photo shoot in particular where, in between photos, we were just chilling out with Stan Lee, and he was so cool. He was really sharp. He was really funny. He was just, the man. It wasn't uncomfortable at all. It was like he was one of us, except way cooler, I guess.
Did you get the chance to pick his brains about certain things, like how to break
It
into the
was
comic book
it was
business
more
like that?
casual than that. It wasn't like, oh, tell me your secret for how to write a huge successful comic. Pull out my notebook, Stan. It was kind of just shooting the shit um, in between takes.
Awesome.
Yeah, he was really, really cool.
Uh, did he like on the show he does actually get the chance to speak to you guys via the monitor
Right.
about a couple of things like I think there's a point in the show, I think again it's close to the end of the season, where he
Hmm.
speaks to the three finalists, yourself included, about who you are behind the persona. Um, how was that for both yourself and the other two finalists? Because from what we've seen on the show, at certain times it could be quite emotional. Just telling the telling Stan a little bit about your past and how he can come to understand who you guys are.
Right, right. I mean, I think that's part of the intentional design of the show is by that point we're exhausted. We've been there for I can't remember if it was 2 or 3 weeks that we were shooting.
Hmm.
But I mean, we're not getting much sleep. We're doing these grueling physical activities. We're on camera pretty much 24 hours a day. Like you're fairly well exhausted by the end of that, and it's easy to get emotional without even realizing it. I mean, I don't know if uh, maybe I should have opened up more than I did, but I mean, I felt like I was a lot more likely to let things come pouring out than I was at the beginning, just because having gone through so much for so long in such a sustained way. But I think that's what they're going for. They want you to be kind of broken down and like cracking open our shells in a way.
Okay. Um, well, you guys managed that in a great way, because it by the time we got to that point in the show, we were also almost kind of drained from seeing you guys go through all
Right.
of that. So seeing that kind of gave us that little glimmer of, oh, these are real people. They're not just actors or
True.
performers in that sense, but they're actual people with actual problems which we can identify with. Which, when writing a character, Stan is very particular about what that particular character's like real life is like.
Hmm.
You know, we see that when he's writing Peter Parker or the Hulk or
Sure.
whoever. We see the person behind the hero, which
Exactly.
was so great to see for all of you guys. And like I said, it gave us another like avenue to say, right, okay, I've went through something similar to what you have, what she has, what he has, kind of thing.
Hmm.
Which again, it was so great to see, and it made it so much harder to see who would win the show, because we all had our thoughts on who would win, and we were like,
Sure.
yep, I want to see this person get through. Um,
That's why I thought it was cool that they let all three of us through to the final round. Because I mean, the round
yeah.
before that, it's like I don't think any of us really deserves to go home. I think we're all doing a good job, and
Hmm.
I thought that was cool of them that they kept all three of us. I thought it was the right thing to do.
When the finale came along, what was kind of like running through your head, other than the fact of, yes, I finally get to go home? um, what was kind of just running through then?
Yeah, I mean, like you say, getting to go home was a big part of it. But I also, of course, hoping that I won. That would have been nice, after going through all that. But also, like, I was fine losing to either the diffuser or hygiene. They were both great. So, yeah, I guess mixed emotions. Uh, I guess it's like crossing the finish line at that point.
Uh-huh.
It's bittersweet in some ways.
And now let's get down to a little bit of a juicy question here. What was it like living with all of the guys there in the house? Because did anybody have any annoying habits that just got on your nerves or
I think we were being kept too busy to really,
notice?
yeah, yeah. I mean, there was no shortage of, well, in some ways there was no shortage of entertainment, and in other ways there was, they would leave us alone for hours at a time while they got whatever was next set up.
Hmm.
But I think we were all just so excited, like kids in a candy store.
There's a really cool part where you guys are on your downtime and you're in the house and you're all just kind of like doing your own thing, like lying on the couches and whatnot. And I don't remember what the situation was or what you guys were talking about, but you just got up, went over to the kitchen, and picked up some fruit out of the fruit bowl and just started juggling with it.
Sure.
And I was like, oh, that is just so great. It kind of moved along from your circus background, which a lot of people kind of started to know about then.
Hmm.
Um, and it kind of entertained everybody in the house, and you just seen like the smiles coming off of people's faces. And I was like, that's going to be like one of the best feelings in the world, seeing all of these people just kind of smile at something so, um, I don't know how to put it across here. This is so difficult. Um, I wouldn't say it was ordinary, but it's kind of like an almost well-known technique.
Hmm.
Like you would be able to say better of yourself having had a previous experience in the circus. Like you know how high up in the ranking that juggling goes.
Right.
Um, so yeah, it was so amazing to just see that kind of smile because the camera I think specifically focuses on Diffuser because you just see this kind of like childlike smile on his face. Um, so seeing stuff like that was really, really cool on a reality TV show because not a lot of things were happening like that on reality TV, and they still don't, in my opinion. Um, but yes, so let's talk about the actual finale. Did you guys get told beforehand who was winning, or was it boom?
I don't remember. I have to be honest. I don't remember if they told us like just beforehand what was really going on, or if they let it be real. They must have let it be real. They were really good about getting the
Keeping those
most genuine
people.
reactions from us that they could. But they filmed. The interesting thing is they filmed all three of us winning. I think they told us,
Ah,
Diffuser really won, but we're going to film all three of you winning. And I'm not quite sure what their reasons were for that. I think part of it could have just been because they had a real crowd there.
hmm,
I don't think they wanted people running off and being like, "Oh, this is who won the show."
right.
I think they still wanted
Um,
some mystery. Maybe it was just for the people watching,
right.
or maybe it was in case something legally didn't work out along the road. They could switch if they had to. I'm not sure why they did that.
Probably from the being able to switch if they had to. Um, Now, it is said that if you won the show, you got the opportunity to be on a sci-fi original movie.
Right.
Um, so far in the United Kingdom, we've only seen last year's winner
Hmm.
on a sci-fi original movie, and it was like for like a split second.
Yeah, it was
Um,
like Mega Snake, right? With the
yeah,
back
yeah.
there. Yeah.
I've been patiently waiting for the day when we see Diffuser or any of
Right.
you guys on a movie because it would be so cool to see just any one of them or any one of you guys in particular. Is that
Sure.
something that you, if you were approached with, would do? Like if you
At this
somebody
point,
said to you, "Hey, we want you to be on this movie for like 5 seconds or however long."
yeah, I'd probably do it.
Awesome. Um, so my last question in regards to the show for you is, what opportunities did Who Wants to Be a Superhero open up for you in particular?
It probably opened a fair amount, but I ignored them all because I was really stubborn at the time and I was just focused on street performing. Um, so yeah, I'm not really sure what those opportunities were because I was busy slamming the door shut to do something else, which in hindsight probably wasn't wise.
Okay. Um, has it, lastly, for that particular segment of Who Wants to Be a Superhero, if they ever got in contact with you again to come back as maybe like a mentor to the show, if they were like changing up a little bit of the formula, would
Hmm.
you do that?
It's funny, I had a dream that they did something like that, and I was back in my tights, and I was kind of grumpy about it. I was like, man, I'm too old for this now, but it was also kind of fun in the dream. and it was
Hmm.
good to see the diffuser and Hygiena and the other competitors again. So yeah, I think if they called me, I'd probably do it.
Okay. Um, and I just said that that was the last one, but I've just had another one pop into my head.
Sure.
Who were you closest with on the cast of people that were there? Who's somebody that you're still in contact with from the show?
I'm friends with Parthenon and Hygiena and the diffuser on Facebook,
Hmm.
but I don't really talk to them much. Um, as far as on the show, I felt pretty close to everybody. But I guess I felt when Mr. Mitzvah left, that was a little tough. I felt like he was kind of an outcast. He never fit in, so I felt that way as a kid, and I felt bad for him when he ended up getting eliminated. I mean, I saw it coming, obviously, but
Hmm.
and also Whip Snap. I was in
That
a
was
close
one thing
friendship
that
with
that was one thing that I wanted to ask you guys, well, ask you in particular about, because
her.
when she left the show, it
Yeah,
immediately had an impact on everybody. You could
yeah.
literally see that because you all just kind of went around her and hugged her so tightly.
Hmm.
Um, so was that a really difficult elimination for you?
Yeah, it was, and I felt like I played a part in it. I think they did something pretty cruel, like, who do you think should be eliminated? And you have to pick somebody, and it can't be yourself.
Hmm.
And I just had to be honest. I think I don't remember the details, but whatever the last challenge had been, I felt like she had, done the worst job somehow. It was probably not even her own fault, but just as luck would have it, I felt like she'd been the one to, mess it up the most somehow. And I had to write her name down, and I think she felt betrayed by me, but it was nothing against her, and I'd rather have not written down anybody's name, but they forced us to. Um, but yeah, I mean, I remember we watched what is it, Kung Fu Hustle one night all together, and she was just so, I don't know, it was really interesting watching the movie through her eyes and hearing her comments, and it made me realize what I mean, I already realized, but she was just such a nice person and such a warm and caring person, and I don't know. I guess we bonded in a
Was there
strong way.
ever was there ever anybody on the show that you felt wasn't represented the way that they should have been? Like you mentioned Mr. Mitzvah there, like um, from what we see of the show, we get a very direct kind of it's so many minutes long of who that person is.
Right.
Um, like for instance, when you said that you felt that Whipsnap might have done something wrong in the last challenge before she was eliminated,
Hmm.
I have to like agree with you on that front because I think that's what you actually said. Like I felt she did this wrong. That's why
Hmm.
I'm picking her. Um, and looking back on it, there probably was something she did wrong, but not maybe down to her decisioning there. But was there anybody that you feel when you watched the show back that they, sorry, it's a little bug there. Um, was there anybody on the show that you felt didn't get ample opportunity to show off how cool they really were from hanging out with them?
It's funny when I watched the show, the one who I thought they painted in the worst light, or the light that was most different from how they actually were in person, was the diffuser. I thought
Hmm.
they made him seem a lot more stiff and controlling and authoritarian than he is in real life at all. But I felt like that's how they portrayed him initially on the show, and I was like, Diffuser's super cool. He's not this big, tough, mean cop guy all the time by any means. And maybe if you pick certain clips, it can make him seem that way. I mean,
Hmm.
I don't know why. I don't need to defend him. He won the show, but I remember thinking it was ironic when I watched the actual episodes that I thought that they didn't make him look as cool as he actually is.
Okay. It's funny that you should say that because I do actually, as we're talking about it, I'm remembering earlier and later episodes of the season, and I'm just thinking, yeah, you have a point there. Because yes, in the beginning of the second season, he is painted as this kind of like big, no nonsense police
Hmm.
officer, but as it goes on, you do see this kind of more softer side of him. Like I think
Yeah.
by the end, you got like the finalists really are the kind of family unit,
Hmm.
which is really awesome to see on screen. And I will, no, I won't lie to you. When it came time for the finale, I was just like, just please let them all win, because that would be great, and it would be the next great superhero group having all three of you. You
Hmm.
know, um, and I felt by that point you guys had really built up that kind of family unit in a sense. You know, like we all say we will have our like family units with our friends kind of thing.
Hmm.
But I was seeing that and I was just like, if you want another superhero team stand, there it is. You know, just
Right.
all three of them. Um, and
Well, I wish they'd consulted you.
pardon?
I said, I wish they'd consulted you.
Trust me, I would have happily worked for them at that point. Only like what, maybe 18, 19 at the time. So I would have happily worked for any comic book company.
Fresh out of high school.
Yep, very much. Um, okay, so let's move on from talking about the show because, quite frankly, I could talk about the show all night long. Um, so, since being with Who Wants to Be a Superhero, you've done other things as well, like your street performance. Let's talk a little bit about that. How did you how did you get involved with the street performing, and what was your main goal with that?
Um, as I mentioned before, I was involved with Circus Smirkus, and I had my two Russian coaches who were like circus parents to me. They had a student who was older than me, and he had also been in Circus Smirkus, but he was done with it at this point. And he had started street performing, and I really looked up to him. He's like an older brother to me.
Hmm.
He's one of my best friends to this day, and we actually ended up working together a bunch, performing for state and county fairs. We were touring around for a few years there. Anyway, I saw him street performing when I was younger, and he was older. He's still older, and yeah, I mean, I actually wasn't that impressed by it when I first saw it. It's a lot more slow paced than a circus act. There's a lot of talking. But then he told me how much money he was making, and I was like, oh my God. I was really taken aback. And then I decided I needed to learn how to do that. This way, like I said before, when there isn't work with a regular show, I could still go out and make money.
There was actually one stunt that somebody put up on, I think it was you put up on your own Facebook, where you guys are in a marketplace and there's this massive stack of chairs just going all the way up. And somebody, which I'm assuming is you, is doing a
Hmm.
handstand at the top of this set of chairs.
Yeah,
Was that
that's
you?
day to day. What's that?
Was that you that was doing the handstand?
Where did you see this?
I think somebody shared it on your own personal Facebook.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that would have been me then. I'm not the only one in the world doing stacking chairs by any means, but I am one of the only guys doing it on the street.
Hmm.
And I
Um,
should mention that guy who got me into street performing.
yeah.
His name is Sam Johnson, and he actually has a few episodes of a little online reality TV show that he started to make about street performers. I think
Awesome.
it's called Street Performers with Sam Johnson, and there's even an episode about me that he hasn't released it, but hopefully he will someday. But
Well,
I'm in one or two of those episodes already, just real small part, but they're good. I would suggest checking them out if any of the people watching this interview are interested in street performing at all.
awesome.
Street Performers with Sam Johnson. Check it out.
We will have a link for that in the description of this video, guys. So please do go down to the description down below and check out that show after this interview.
Perfect.
Um,
Thank
so
you.
after having been doing street performing, you managed to get into, well, not managed, but you got into doing writing for comic books. So tell us how you managed to get into that. Like, what's the story there?
You know, I've always I had this great plan when I was younger that I would do circus for many years, and then I'd be a movie star for many years, and then I would start my own animation, comic, video game company and do that for the rest of my life.
Hmm.
Um, and street performing was going to pay for the circus act, the circus career, but it was taking me so long to make decent money street performing. I was like, you know, I have to be honest with myself, and I need to just, time is precious. Things take way longer to do than I originally thought they would. So I need to skip ahead to the thing I want to do the most, and that is, anime, manga, video games. I just love that stuff more than anything when I'm totally honest with myself.
Mhm.
So I started writing. I thought, I can't really draw at all. So I figured, my way in would be writing and directing. Um, so yeah, I started learning how to write screenplays, and I wrote one, and then I started a second one. And while I was working on the second one, I was like, well, this is really inspired by comic books. I should maybe turn this into a comic book since, it's hard to sell a screenplay, and honestly, maybe it would help to sell the screenplay if it became a comic book, and then that comic book had some sort of success. That was my thought process.
Awesome.
Mhm.
So let's talk a little bit about your creative process, because I know when I'm doing a little bit of writing, just a tiny bit, because let's
Mhm.
face it, sometimes I can't spell to save myself. But do you base any of your characters on people that you know, or are they all just out of your own imagination in that sense?
I think it's um, a lot of influence from people that you know or have known throughout your life. And I mean, it might not even be conscious. I think a lot of it is subconscious. The
Mhm.
characters will just pop into your head, and I think people will attribute that being from different sources. But I think a lot of it is the people you've met over the course of your life and certain aspects of them that are still brewing in your subconscious, and then they join together with other aspects of other people, and some new thing pops into your conscious all of a sudden.
Awesome. Um, so let's talk about now your new comic that you're releasing, or
Mm-hmm.
have released, I should say. Um, so I'm going to hand over to you, and you can tell us a little bit about your comic. So
Yeah,
go
it's
for it.
based off of the second screenplay I wrote. Um, it's called Tomb Busters.
Hmm.
It's about an 11-year-old girl who can see and speak to ghosts, and she gets recruited by this team of treasure hunters who they're competing in this intergalactic treasure hunting tournament. And when they find this girl, they figure they can use her to raid haunted alien tombs that other teams can't because of her powers. So that's the basic premise. I was inspired a lot by One Piece, the manga. Actually, when I was writing the screenplay, I like in One Piece how there's different teams. Whereas, Dragon Ball, for instance, it's usually just one on one, two guys fighting. I think the team dynamics in One Piece are really interesting, and I like how there's just as much adventure as there is fighting in One Piece. So I figured, I guess it's a pretty simple idea. I was like, oh, I'll do that in space. um, but hopefully it turned out more different from One Piece than just that.
Now, one thing I do have to ask you, when you're writing a character, do you tend to go for long periods of time where you just kind of like continuously are writing, or do you divide it up into sections of the day where you can be like, right, I'll write from this point to this point,
Mm-hmm.
and then go do something else, and then from this point to this point again?
I think everyone's process is different with screenwriting or writing in general.
Hmm.
So when I say this, I'm not like, oh, this is the way you should do it.
Hmm.
But for me, 3 hour writing blocks are good, and I'll either do one or two of those a day. And if I do one, it'll either be one in the afternoon or one late at night, are the two times I like to write. Um, and if I do both, it'll be both of those times. But
Awesome.
I take a pretty big break in between those two times if I do both.
Okay. Um, who out of the kind of current characters that we've been introduced to so far in the series, um, is there any particular one that's based on somebody from your family or even yourself?
Um, I think once again it's a combination. I mean, even who I am is based on people in my family to a large extent. But yeah, I think mostly the main characters are different aspects of myself. which, like I say, is based off of other people I've met, I think. But the dinosaur, Kong, is largely based off of these two dogs my parents had. It's just something I think they tend to do when they get dogs. They get two, first off, and then one of them is really outgoing and domineering and playful, and the other one tends to be more reserved and sort of neurotic. So they've had two sets of dogs in a row now where that one ends up being kind of a basket case and really timid, but lovable in a weird way. And I guess Kong is based off of those two dogs, which have developed very similar personalities.
Awesome. Is there any characters now that you're currently writing that maybe haven't been introduced yet that we should be looking out for?
The story has been done for years now. I wrote the screenplay. I guess I finished that in late 2014.
Mhm.
So uh, it's all done already.
Awesome. Um, so let's talk a little bit about the animation process of the comic book. You mentioned yourself earlier in the interview that there is somebody who illustrates it for you.
Mm-hmm.
Um, how long does he normally take to do the various panels? Because I've been reading through them and I'm just looking at artwork and going, wow. Um, how long does that take on average?
We do 2 pages a week. I'm not sure how long it takes Raul to do each individual panel, and I think some panels take longer than others
Hmm.
if they're more detailed or if it's a more important scene. Um, so yeah, that would actually be a better question for Raul, but I know he sometimes he does it very fast. He's super talented, and I know even though he's just doing 2 pages a week for me, he's doing tons of other freelance work and working on his own projects. I mean, he's a very prolific artist, and I'm super lucky that he agreed to work with me on this project.
Awesome. Um, so when you're doing dialogue for the characters, do you tend to like put yourself in that position or
Doing what for the characters? Sorry.
dialogue?
Oh, sure.
When the character is speaking to another character, do you tend to put yourself in that character's shoes, or is it more of an omnipotent thing when you're writing it?
I think subconsciously I'm probably putting myself in their shoes, but when I'm consciously, it feels like I'm watching them in my head. I just watch the scene and like write down what they say, which is a once again that's a surreal experience, but it's fun. It's like I get to watch the movie before anyone else does
Uh-huh.
in a way.
Um, what advice would you give to anybody who is currently like maybe experiencing a little bit of writer's block or anything like that, or who's currently writing? Sorry, I've just realized that somebody's popped up.
That's fine.
Okay.
Um, I think there are a lot of better writers out there who would have different advice on how to handle writer's block, and something I hear often is just to push through it,
Hmm.
which I think, I don't know, writer's block, I think, is different for everyone. It comes in so many different forms. I guess my personal advice would be not to stress out about it. I think it's easy to beat yourself up or feel defeated if you don't know what to write. But I think if you don't know my personal philosophy, I'm not saying this is correct, but if you don't know what to write, then don't write. Take a break or just stop. I mean, I think it's good to feel inspired. And some people will say that's terrible advice. You have to write no matter how you feel, and that's how you get through it. And maybe that is effective for some people, but for me personally, if I'm not inspired, I just don't write and I wait for inspiration. But I'm also not a professional writer at this point. I've never been paid for my writing, so I don't have the pressure of needing to make a living through writing. So I have the luxury of taking my time, and I enjoy waiting for that inspiration to come, I guess.
Awesome. So the next question I have for you is how would you feel if one day somebody turned Tomb Busters into an anime to begin with, and then maybe
Hmm.
a live action movie? Like how would you feel about that kind of thing?
Yeah, I mean, that's my dream. That would be my dream come true. That'd be way better than winning the lottery or getting rich somehow. That's what I really want to do. That's
Awesome.
my dream, is that I have to move to Japan, or I get to move to Japan and be involved with an animation studio that's animating one of my stories, and I can learn about animation that way instead of going to school or something. Yeah, I mean that there's no better thing that could happen to me in my life, so far as I'm aware.
Is there any particular studio that you would hope would pick up that your storyline and maybe make an anime out of it, or
You know,
even a live action movie?
I couldn't give you an educated answer to that right now. I don't watch that much modern anime. I think the last anime I saw that I really loved was Gurren Lagann, and
Hmm.
even that, I think you could argue, was kind of an old-fashioned anime, even though it was done more recently. I tend to enjoy the classic anime more, and a lot of the anime I see nowadays just doesn't look right to me. And also, I think getting so into manga changed my view of anime, even though anime is, I still love it probably even more than manga. Like I say, it's been a while since I saw an anime where I was like, wow, that's even better than the manga was, or that's I think what's nice about manga is it's, the artist is doing every page, and that's the best quality control there is. Whereas I think a lot of the anime you see, it's a huge team of people, and they don't necessarily care about the characters. It's just a job for them, and the directors, producers are making them drag it out intentionally so they can sell more commercials. Whereas I find that the manga tends to be a lot more condensed and genuine for me.
Okay.
I don't mean to
No, 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 no,
talk
that's fine.
smack about modern anime, but
Oh, that's fine. I mean, modern anime isn't everybody's cup of tea, and that's just something that people need to respect, you know. Um, so my next question for you is, what advice would you give anybody who is looking to break in to the comic book business but is a little unsure where to start?
I still haven't really broken in. Toon Busters is still very new. It has yet to become a success. But the only advice I could give you is, if you really want to do it, then do it. Don't wait. I mean, I didn't wait. I just started making it. I didn't try to get hired, which maybe is foolish. Maybe I should try to collaborate more. But I feel like I have collaborated more with this project by working with Raul.
Hmm.
Um, if you love it, if you want to do it, stop hesitating. Even if it's not going to work out in the end, you have to try.
Other
You have to go
than
through, I think.
other than Stanley, who has been some of your inspirations in the comic book world?
Yeah, I mean, I always talk about it. My two biggest comic inspirations are Akira Toriyama, who did Dragon Ball and Doctor Slump, among
Hmm.
others, and Ichiro Oda, who did One Piece. But even Ichiro Oda, well, here's an interesting thing. Ichiro Oda, he never denies that his main inspiration was also Akira Toriyama and Dragon Ball. And then Akira Toriyama, when he talks about starting Dragon Ball, he says that what inspired him to do it was he saw a Jackie Chan movie, Drunken Master, on TV. So it's weird. It feels like everything in my life kind of stems back to Jackie Chan.
Awesome.
You know,
What an awesome thing to do is to send all
uh,
the way back to one person.
yeah, it's weird, right? It's a little
It's a
freaky.
full circle, full circle.
Yeah, it
Um,
is.
so I'm gonna
Did
ask
you hear that
you.
Jackie Chan is winning an honorary Oscar
No, I
this year?
didn't.
Yeah,
Awesome. Well done, Jackie
lifetime
Chan.
achievement Oscar. Hmm.
Um, so I'm going to bring this interview full circle and ask you, John, where can we get a hold of you on social media if we have any further questions for you?
Yeah, I have a Facebook page as John Stork. I think if you search John Stork Entertainer, it should pop up. The picture is a cartoon of me that Raul drew for Toon Busters. Um, yeah, I'm not too hip on social media. I need to get better. That'd probably be the best way now. I have a Twitter account, but it's largely dormant. I have an Instagram account. Actually, I just have a personal Instagram account. Yeah, I'd say the Facebook page or maybe Twitter.
Okay. Well, before we close up, guys, I've got my little bit that I have to do on behalf of iGame Online. If you're not already, you can go along to iGame Online. It's a free sign up, and you can keep up to date with everything that iGame Online is doing, whether it be our cosplay group with NUK, our MERP session, which is recorded, or our possibly our Dragonland session by now, I don't know, or our weekly podcast where you can catch up with myself, Wispa, Honey Jade, Dark Lee, and Sally, as well as Georgia Kitty. We have a full cast. Or anything else that we're doing there. And don't forget, you can actually set up a gaming group there or any other type of group. So, yep, go along, see what's happening on iGame and see what's happening there. Also, don't forget to subscribe to me for further content on this channel, as well as giving this video a good thumbs up and leaving us a little comment down. I think it's maybe, is it down there, John? Do you see that comment section down there?
Oh yeah, it looks good. It's
Like,
ready for some great comments.
give us a little hello, and we'll do what we can. If you have any questions, we'll see what John can answer via the comment section down below. But I'd like to thank John for taking the time out and spending it with us.
Thanks for
And
having
thank you for coming. It's been an absolute pleasure.
me. It's fun.
So I'm off, guys, and I'll be back with another interview really soon. Bye.